I clinked my glass, stood up, and smiled. I wasn't supposed to speak at their wedding, but neither of them expected what I was about to say. My name is Emily, and until a year ago, I believed in two things with unshakable certainty: that my sister and I were unbreakable, that the man I was dating would be my future. I was wrong on both counts. I met Andrew first. It was one of those accidental, cosmic kinds of meetings. He was fixing a projector in the university auditorium. I was trying to sneak in for a quiet place to cry after a brutal phone call with our mother. He handed me a tissue before I even said a word. We talked for 3 hours that night, and we never really stopped. He wasn't flashy, not the bad boy type. He was warm, gentle, the kind of man who remembered how you took your coffee even when you forgot to drink it. We dated for almost 2 years. We weren't perfect, but we were steady. And I truly thought he was my person. My sister Chloe was the opposite of him in every way. Sharp-tongued, charismatic, always the center of attention. Where I softened rooms, she took them over. We grew up close, or so I thought. She was 2 years younger, but often acted older. The kind of girl who knew how to manipulate a situation before most people knew it needed manipulating. Still, she was my sister, and I let her in. I told her everything about Andrew, what he said when he was nervous, what he looked like when he was tired, how he'd hum songs when he cooked, the way he made me feel seen in a world where I often felt invisible. She listened, smiled, teased, and I never noticed the way she looked at him. Not until the weekend I went away for a writer's retreat. I came back early, walked into my apartment, and found her there, on my couch, wearing his shirt. She didn't even flinch, just smiled, slow, cat-like, and said, "I guess now's as good a time as any to talk about this." That's how she told me. No guilt, no apology, just that smug little smirk she'd been perfecting since high school. And Andrew? He didn't even speak. Just stood there like a child caught between two parents, ashamed, but not enough to stop. I left without a word, and I didn't speak to either of them for 6 months until I got the wedding invitation. Chloe and Andrew, together with their families, invite you to witness their union. I stared at the envelope, laughed out loud. They wanted me to watch, to bless it, to clap like nothing had been stolen. But I said yes, not because I forgave them, but because I had a plan, one they'd never see coming. I RSVP'd, bought a new dress, sat quietly in the second row, and when the microphone was opened for impromptu blessings from loved ones, I stood up, lifted my glass, and smiled. Block 2. She looked so smug in that white dress, until I opened my mouth. I walked up slowly, deliberate, no trembling hands, no nervous laugh. Just the sound of my heels echoing across the dance floor as I took the mic from the best man. A hush fell over the crowd. I could feel it. The shift. People weren't expecting me to speak, especially not after everything. But there I was, in a navy silk dress that matched the color of calm rage, smiling like a woman who finally knew how to use her voice. Andrew's eyes widened. He knew. Chloe, on the other hand? She smirked, assumed I'd give a nice little toast, something passive, polite, a pretty bow to wrap up our family dysfunction. So I started soft. "Hi, I'm Emily. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the sister of the bride, and once upon a time, I was also the girlfriend of the groom." Gasps, soft, stifled, beautiful. Andrew looked down. Chloe. Her smirk twitched, but I kept going. I was asked to give a blessing, and I will. But first, I want to tell a short story. 2 years ago, I met a man, a good man, or so I thought. He made me laugh, made me feel safe. I imagined a life with him, late-night talks, shared apartments, maybe even a ring. I scanned the room. All eyes were locked on me now. What I didn't imagine was walking into my own home and finding him shirtless, with my sister wearing his clothes. More gasps. A waiter dropped a tray in the corner. I didn't even flinch. Now, a lesser woman would have stormed out, made a scene, or disappeared forever. But I'm not lesser. I watched. I waited. And today, I'm here to give you both what you clearly wanted all along. I raised my glass. Attention. Andrew looked sick. Chloe's face had hardened into a porcelain mask, not cracked yet, but close. So here's my blessing. May your marriage be as faithful as your beginnings. May your home be as honest as your first lie. And may you one day look your children in the eye and know they'll never trust either of you the way I once did. Silence. Not a pin drop. Not even breath. Then someone clapped. One person, then another, until half the room, the half that knew, was on their feet. Chloe stormed out. Andrew followed, shoulders hunched like a man walking into his own funeral. I handed the mic back, sat down, took a sip of champagne, and smiled, not because it was done, but because it was finally undeniable. Block 3. She thought people would forget. That image was enough, but I'd already stolen something she could never reclaim: the narrative. The wedding reception didn't end, not officially, but it unraveled. Half the guests stayed out of sheer shock. The DJ tried to salvage the mood with a weak remix of Uptown Funk. Someone's aunt requested a group photo like nothing had happened. But most people, they whispered. They shifted. They watched. Because something had cracked in the carefully curated fantasy Chloe had spent months crafting. I didn't stick around long. Just long enough to see her return, red-faced, clutching her veil like a lifeline, and do what she did best: perform. "So sorry about that, everyone," she said with a shaky laugh. "Family drama, right? What's a wedding without a little chaos?" Some chuckled awkwardly. Others just stared. Andrew didn't reappear until dessert. His tie was gone. His shirt wrinkled. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the span of 20 minutes. They didn't cut the cake together. They didn't dance. They just lingered. Hollow. I went home that night and did something I hadn't done in months. I opened my journal, and I wrote, "She took the man. I took the story. She married a body. I buried the illusion." 2 days later, my phone buzzed. "Chloe." I let it ring. Twice, 3 times. Then I picked up. "What the hell was that?" she snapped. No hello, no pause. Just rage. "That," I said calmly, "was the truth. You humiliated us in front of everyone." "No," I said. "You did that. I just gave the room better lighting." She went silent, then quieter. "You don't understand. Andrew chose me." "No," I corrected. "He settled for you, after breaking me." A beat passed. "Do you want him back?" she asked, bitterness dripping. I almost laughed. "You think this was about him?" She didn't respond. "Chloe, this wasn't revenge. It was relief. You don't scare me anymore. You don't matter more than my peace." She hung up. No goodbye. And I realized, for the first time in years, that I wasn't afraid of her leaving again. Because I no longer needed her to stay. Block 4. I used to rehearse confrontations in my head. Now, I rehearse peace. The week after the wedding felt strange, quiet. Like the aftermath of a storm that had uprooted everything, but somehow left you standing. I got a few texts from mutual friends. "Emily, wow. You okay?" Honestly, she deserved it. Even my Aunt Sheila, who always played Switzerland, sent a message that read, "Proud of you. About damn time someone said it out loud." But mostly people stayed silent. I think they were processing. I was too. Not what had happened, That part was clear. But what to do next, now that I wasn't anyone's shadow anymore? I started small, cleaned my apartment, deleted old voicemails, canceled subscriptions Andrew used to piggyback off of. I even burned a sweater he left behind, scented it with lavender first, just to make the flames poetic. One night, I logged onto LinkedIn, of all places, and updated my headline to writer, storyteller, boundary builder. It felt cheesy, but also true. Then I got an unexpected message. "Hi, Emily. This is Clara from your senior writing seminar. Just saw the clip from the wedding speech. Someone tagged me. Wild. I run a podcast called Sisterhood Scars. Would you be open to an interview? Your voice is powerful." I stared at it for 10 minutes. Someone had recorded me? I hadn't even noticed. I found the video. 26 seconds. Just the part where I raised my glass and said, "May your marriage be as faithful as your beginnings." The comments were brutal, but not for me. That's the coldest toast I've ever heard. Queen energy. This is why you don't mess with a woman who journals. Sis gave HBO finale energy at a wedding. I should have been mad, should have felt exposed, but I didn't. Because for once, people saw her the way I always had. And more importantly, they saw me the way I'd always hoped to be. Clear, calm, unshakable. So I messaged Clara back, said yes. Not to drag Chloe further, but to tell the truth, my truth, in my own words. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is letting the world hear your side and realizing they were waiting all along. Block 5. They wanted me to be quiet. Now people are quoting me on coffee mugs. The podcast episode went live on a Tuesday morning, titled, "The Sister, the Steel, and the Speech Heard Round the Wedding." I thought maybe a few hundred people would listen. Within 48 hours, it had over 150,000 streams. By the end of the week, 500,000. I didn't hold back. I didn't name names. But the details were clear enough that anyone who knew us knew. I told the whole story. How Chloe weaponized charm like a scalpel. How Andrew mirrored whoever gave him attention. How I kept shrinking, apologizing, accommodating, until I finally cracked open. The host, Clara, was brilliant, compassionate. She asked the right things. At one point she said, "You weren't just betrayed. You were erased, and your toast rewrote the story in real time." I cried. Not ugly sobs, just soft, silent ones. The kind that come when someone finally names something you've carried without words. People started messaging me, dozens, then hundreds, women, men, even therapists. Your story helped me walk away from someone who gaslit me for years. My sister did the same thing, and no one ever believed me. This podcast should be required, listening for every woman who has ever been told to be the bigger person. And then, Chloe messaged me, again. This time, "Hope you're happy. I can't show my face at work. People are talking. My boss heard the podcast." I read it twice, then typed, "You made your choices. I just stopped covering for them." She left me on read. A week later, I got a DM from someone unexpected, Andrew's ex-girlfriend, before me. She wrote, "Just heard your interview. I thought I was crazy for how he treated me. You just gave my past closure." That wrecked me in the best way, because I realized something. My story didn't just matter because it was dramatic. It mattered because it echoed. Because there are thousands, maybe millions, of women who are taught to be graceful in the face of betrayal. And I wasn't graceful. I was honest. And that honesty gave others permission to stop shrinking. Block 6. She posted a glossy apology, but the comments had already chosen their heroine. And it wasn't her. It was a Friday evening when Chloe made her move. She posted a video. Instagram, full makeup, warm lighting, that soft, trembling voice she reserved for manipulating public sympathy. "Hi, everyone. This isn't easy, but I wanted to say something." She called it an open reflection, said she'd made mistakes, that family dynamics are complicated, that love doesn't always arrive in the right order. She never said my name, but we both knew exactly who she was talking about. I know I've hurt people, but I'm growing, I'm learning, and I hope, in time, to earn forgiveness. Classic Chloe. Take accountability just enough to be applauded. Avoid specifics. Control the message. The video had over 10,000 likes in a day, but the comments? Different story. "You forgot to mention you stole your sister's man. This sounds like PR, not a real apology." Emily's podcast gave more honesty in 40 minutes than you just did in 4. Still waiting for you to actually say her name. And my favorite. Growth isn't an Instagram filter. It's a consequence. I didn't comment, didn't post anything, didn't text her. Because something had shifted inside me. Months ago, that video would have wrecked me. Now, it just looked small, because Chloe was still fighting to preserve an image, while I had already stepped into truth. There's something terrifying for people like her about someone who stops playing the game. Because when you no longer want to win their game, you're free. I got another podcast invitation that night, this time a panel. Topic: narrative theft, when women are forced to be the villain in their own story. I said yes, not to drag Chloe further, but because this conversation was bigger now. I wasn't telling a revenge tale anymore. I was telling a recovery story, and I knew this. Every time I told it, one more person out there would stop apologizing for surviving betrayal with backbone. Block 7. Closure doesn't always knock on your door. Sometimes it texts you at 2:13 a.m. with a truth you didn't expect to need. I was asleep when the message came in. 2:13 a.m. The screen lit up my bedroom like a quiet alarm. Andrew. I stared at it for a full minute before I opened it. "Hey, I know I don't have the right to reach out, but I listened to the podcast. You told the truth. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. I should have never let her come between us the way she did. You deserved loyalty. You deserved honesty. You deserved better. And you were always better than both of us." I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to anymore. This message wasn't for a second chance. It was for closure. And I already had mine. I turned off the phone, rolled over, and went back to sleep. I dreamt about something simple. Me, sitting by a lake, writing, laughing, whole. No past, no drama, no audience, just peace. The next morning, I met up with Clara, the podcast host, for coffee. She handed me a manila envelope. "Fan mail," she said, grinning. "You've officially gone viral in the therapist community." Inside were printed letters, emails, even drawings. One note stood out. "Thank you for saying what I've never had the courage to say to my sister. Because of you, I finally mailed her the letter I wrote 5 years ago and never sent." I folded it slowly, pressed it against my chest. This is what healing looks like. Not headlines, not revenge fantasies, but small ripples that move through strangers and stitch the world a little tighter together. And suddenly, I knew. This story was done. Not erased, not forgotten, but complete. And I could move forward. Not to find someone else, not to prove anything, but to live louder in the spaces where I used to whisper. Block 8. I walked into that room and nobody asked about him. Or her. They just wanted to hear me speak. It was a women's leadership summit. Small but well curated. Intimate. Intentional. Transformational. Clara had submitted my name without telling me. "I figured you'd say no if I asked first," she smiled. But I said yes. Because this time, I wanted to be seen on purpose. The theme was narrative ownership. I was the closing speaker. Standing backstage, I felt the old nerves rise, not fear, but that familiar ache of wondering, who will I be when this is over? The MC introduced me. Please welcome Emily H., writer, advocate, and boundary builder. Applause. I stepped onto the stage. The lights weren't blinding. They were warm. The room wasn't judging. It was waiting. I told my story, the way I always tell it now. Not for shock, not for applause, but for truth. And as I spoke, I saw heads nodding, eyes filling, pens scribbling. I ended with this. If someone tells you that your story is too much, tell them they're free to leave the room. You're not too much. You're just finally speaking at full volume. Standing ovation. Not everyone stood, but enough did. Enough to remind me that I no longer lived in whispers. Afterward, I lingered near the coffee bar, answering questions, taking photos with attendees, collecting hugs, and that's when I saw her, Chloe, across the room. She wasn't there as a speaker, not even as a guest. She was standing by the doorway, watching. No makeup, no camera, just Chloe, raw, maybe even real. Our eyes met. She didn't approach, didn't wave, just nodded. And I nodded back. No bitterness, no war, just two women. One still clinging to the version of the story where she looked better, and the other, me, living proof that the truth doesn't need defending. It just needs daylight. I walked away first, because I was no longer walking out of her shadow. I was walking into my own light. Block 9. Maybe I didn't just survive betrayal. Maybe I built something that could outlive it. 2 weeks after the summit, I received an email. Subject line: book proposal conversation. Are you open? It was from a literary agent, one I'd never met. She'd heard the podcast, then the summit, then the ripple effect that had followed. Her message was clear. You have a voice people are already listening to. I think it's time to put it between pages, and I'd be honored to help you do it. I stared at my screen. My first instinct? Who am I to write a book? But that thought passed faster than it used to. Because now I knew exactly who I was. A woman who stopped letting shame edit her story. I called Clara first. Should I do this? Are you kidding? You already did. The rest is just formatting. We laughed. And something about that laughter, free, unfiltered, reminded me of who I used to be before Chloe, before Andrew. Just a girl with journals and too many drafts and a longing to be heard. The agent and I set up a call. She was sharp, kind, and professional. She asked me what I'd want the book to be. I told her, not a revenge story, not a tell-all, a roadmap for rebuilding identity after you've been publicly erased. She loved it. We talked about chapters, themes, possible titles. One phrase kept coming back. She took the man. I took the mic. It made us both laugh, and then pause. Because it was funny, but also true. In telling my story, I'd given so many others permission to tell theirs. And maybe that was the whole point. Not to get even, but to get free. To help others break the cycle of swallowing their pain just to keep the peace at family dinners. The kind of peace that feels more like silence in disguise. I signed the representation agreement a week later, lit a candle, opened a fresh notebook, wrote on the first page, "This is for every woman who was told to sit down, smile, and be the bigger person. We're done shrinking." Block 10. I went back to the cabin where I first wrote about him. This time, I wrote about me. I booked the same writer's retreat, same weekend, same forest, same dusty windows and whispering trees. I hadn't been back since the day before everything fell apart, before Chloe, before Andrew, before the betrayal that broke me open like a rib cage. It felt poetic, full circle. Only this time I wasn't running from anything. I brought no drama, no bruised heart, just a duffel bag, a fresh laptop, and a quiet sense of being whole. The cabin hadn't changed much. Still smelled like pine and burnt coffee. Still had that creaky floorboard near the kitchenette. Still had that same uneven desk where I once wrote his name over and over, like a spell I couldn't break. This time, I wrote mine, not just as the author, but as the subject. The woman who survived betrayal, yes, but more importantly, the woman who refused to let betrayal define her forever. I wrote for 3 days straight. No edits, no censoring, just truth. Messy, tender, liberating. And on the final night, I did something small, but huge. I took the old journal, the one filled with heartbreak entries and what-ifs. I tore out one page. Only one. The rest, I set in the fireplace. Watched the flames take them gently, like saying goodbye to a version of myself I no longer needed. I stood outside after that, barefoot on the cold porch. Same porch I once stood on, staring at the stars, wondering how love could vanish so quickly. Now, I stared at those same stars and whispered, "Thank you." Not to them, not to Chloe, not to Andrew, to me, for staying, for speaking, for rising, even when the story got ugly. Because that's the thing they never tell you. Healing doesn't look like forgetting. It looks like remembering, without bleeding.